Dark matter is a hypothetical substance that makes up approximately 85% of the matter in our current universe, but for some reason we cannot confirm its existence, since it does not interact with the electromagnetic force. This in turn means it does not absorb, reflect, or emit light, making it extremely hard to spot or even prove its existence. And the only reason us as a species believe in its existence is the unexplained nature of the forces of gravity. So, in this hypothetical of what if Naruto had dark matter or dark matter release, we will be stepping into something closer to a gravitational pull with some fictional spins on the concept of dark matter, which would more closely link it to antimatter. So if you do see some crosses in that little gray section between the two, that is the reason, just to spice the what if up a little bit more. But I've been blabbering on long enough with the explanation, so let's get into this. The warring period would now start as 80,000 odd strong shinobi would be aligned on the battlefield, split into multiple platoons led by the different Kage or different individuals. B and Naruto would be required to stay on the back lines as the last line of defense, since they are too valuable to let out into the world. Meaning earlier events like the Attack Surprise Division versus Sasori and Deidara would probably go exactly as to canon, as not much would really change with B and Naruto being kept away from the front lines. On the other hand, arcs like the 7 Ninja Swordsmen reunite, and even the training and escape arcs for Naruto would completely be voided, as Naruto and B are already on the battlefield, meaning that those arcs wouldn't transpire during the time period of the war. And things like the Clash of Will arc, where Darui faces off against Kinkaku and Ginkaku and even defeats them, would stay unchanged. And as much as I would like to give a change to the Mifune versus Hanzo clash, there really isn't much interaction to be had. And even though those are two of my favorite characters, I will not be compromising the storyline just to add them in. So we would continue to the first point where we might actually see B and Naruto interact, and that is during the entire situation with Asuma. This might not be directly as you might think, with B and Naruto being there personally, but maybe at this point Naruto would use the knowledge to set out some shadow clones into the world to help along, as they told him he could not go. Nothing was said about his shadow clones, meaning we might have Naruto helping Choji through that entire situation where he couldn't accept fighting against Asuma. But that said, arcs like the Daimyo's protection and his protection squad facing off against Black Zetsu would still happen, and the first direct interaction Naruto would have in these battles is the demonic statue or the ghetto statue, who was originally fighting against Choza and Choji after the Asuma battle, but with the presence of a Naruto clone, this fight might go really differently. Obviously, the clones might still have access to summoning creatures like Gamabunta and some of the other toads, meaning that Naruto had access to that and might actually have been able to subdue the ghetto statue, even if only a little earlier. But with that, we would go into arcs that aren't really worth going over in this scenario, like the Zetsu Imposter little arc, where Zetsu would turn into Neji and attempt to infiltrate and destroy the medical camps, which, as per usually, aren't really arcs we need to go into, as they're just something that happens in the background. On the other hand, the arc or mini interaction between Tsunade and A intercepting Naruto and B wouldn't once again happen due to their early presence on the battlefield. This means we won't get that really strong moment where Tsunade places her faith in Naruto quite yet, but things like that might pop up due to other changes on the battlefield. And with that, we would head to the second day of the Great Shinobi War, as Toby would continue his plans and release his own 6 paths, or the 6 paths we know as 6 prior Jinchuriki, consisting of the second tails, third tails, fourth tail, fifth tail, sixth tail, and seventh tail's last Jinchuriki, with the absence of course, Gaara, B, and Naruto, as they still are either alive or retain their Biju. So with this, they would head out and most likely interact with a Naruto clone over the real Naruto, meaning the clone would be in a really tough position and probably disband not from getting hurt, but by using too much chakra. As we know, when a clone runs out of chakra, it would automatically dispel, meaning Naruto would have a transmission from the memories of his clone reaching him, telling him that currently 6 paths consisting of prior Jinchuriki with still access to not only Rinnegan abilities, but still abilities of their respective tailed beast are heading towards the main battlefield. And thus Naruto would want to go help, as no other shinobi besides him and B would really be able to handle this, knowing of course the power of the Rinnegan and that of tailed beast. But as he attempts to head out, he would get another transmission, this one being more threatenous towards the back line of defense and possibly even more dangerous, as around this exact moment, another clone would dispel, informing him that on a separate battlefield they had encountered a reanimated group, you could say, of Itachi and Nagato, meaning Itachi is still under the control of Kabuto, as the real Naruto had not been present to break him out of the Genjutsu. So we would have to insert some sort of custom arc to replace what happened here. So as Nagato and Itachi would head to the back lines to face off against B and Naruto would actually inform the Kage of what's happening, so they would head to center field, or center of the battlefield, where they would instead encounter the tailed beast or Jinchuriki I had mentioned earlier. But lucky for us, even though the clone had dispelled, he had done enough damage between them to actually reveal some of which paths are which, meaning Naruto has some sort of strategy pre-formulated as of having originally fought against the Pains and actually successfully defeated them. But that time he had Jiraiya with him, meaning he'd have to inform B as they continue. With B now informed of what the paths can do, and with the help of Inoichi, their friend back at HQ, having gathered information on the separate tailed beast, would also inform them of the separate abilities, meaning they also now have a rundown of the 2 through 7 tails unique abilities. So, approaching the field, B would prepare to turn into his 8-tailed state, or at least a cloak state, running up, whilst Naruto is in KCM 2. I would like to remind you, back in the Waterfall of Truth, Naruto and Kurama had struck a deal of idealism, meaning that KCM 1 would technically not even exist, as Naruto would instead use a KCM 2 variant without Sage Mode present, as he had been in too much of a hurry going forward. So at this point, B with probably a 1 or 2-tailed cloak and Naruto with KCM 2 would be faced with what they had determined to be a easy fight, as Naruto had access to the Sharingan in this mode, so they had thought it would have gone easy, as they would arrive to only destroy immediately one of Toby's paths or one of the other Jinchuriki, having been able to catch them off guard. But from here on going forward, they would get pretty cocky, them obviously not realizing that all of them had possession not only of the Rinnegan, but the Sharingan. So as it continued, it would get a lot more tricky, forcing Naruto to expend mass amounts of chakra using a dark matter variant of the Rasen Shuriken that would cause mass area of effect damage around itself, as it would create extreme pressures after exploding, meaning even those who didn't get caught by it would be affected by the residual gravity, and those who were even close to it would get pulled into it, since it has a gravity field center, meaning everything is attracted towards it. So this might even result in the destruction of one or more tailed beast, as they would progressively get more cocky, with even B being able to take out some, meaning their Rinnegan was pretty useless, or was thought to be at first. The 3 remaining tailed beasts actually being Yagura, probably the most tricky of this bunch to deal with, the 5th tailed Jinchuriki, Han, who actually has insane physical stats, and the 6th tailed Jinchuriki, Utakata. So with this group in front of them, B and Naruto would actually be faced with a pretty tricky fight, as B would decide to take on Utakata, having a familiarity in water release and the version of water release that Yagura has, we know as bubble style. He would be pretty confident in having access to both his black ink style and lightning release, so he had thought he would have the advantage. As Naruto would go against Yagura, or at least the clone of Naruto created by Yagura's ocean/coral mirror, which creates a perfect clone that is equal in strength to the original, meaning this would be a pretty tricky fight. But along with this, the Yagura who is standing back watching the Naruto clone would be able to inform that clone of Naruto's every move, meaning Naruto would actually be at a disadvantage, sharing a moves and skill set with his clone, but the determined experience level might be different. So Naruto would have a very small chance of actually winning this fight, but also, B would not have as much of an advantage as he thought, as neither his ink style nor his lightning release would really end up affecting Utakata's bubble release. Also, on top of that, Han watching from afar would give Utakata a whereabouts of B at all times, meaning his physical advances wouldn't do much either, and even the occasional sneak attack by both Yagura and Han on Naruto and B respectively. This would lead the two to be split into groups where they would be forced to individually take care of both. Naruto needing to take care of both his own clone and Yagura, and would eventually get rid of Yagura, even if only by a lucky hit of a Rasen Shuriken powered by dark matter release. On the other hand, we would have B, who might be able to take out Utakata or Han separately, most likely dealing with Han first, as he would be able to transform, maybe up to a 7th tail second cloak state, where he might be able to overpower Han and take him out temporarily. This would leave him to have once again a advantage over Utakata and defeat him. But with Yagura and the other tailed beasts' defeat, Naruto's clone would dissipate as his chakra source no longer exists, which would leave the two in a scenario where they thought they could relax after having defeated their opponent. But they couldn't be more wrong, as Obito would have been lurking in the shadows, bringing back the paths that had fallen. Meaning, even though that we had lost the Jinchuriki initially, with Obito restorizing their body not only through the King of Hell, but the fact that they are still reanimations, they would be able to go into their tailed beast states, so we'd still get the unveiling of the spectral Kurama, or the KCM Kurama form, where Naruto and B would be forced to go against the other tailed beast, excluding of course the one tails. But unlike you might think, Naruto would actually be up front, directly having a more melee-like confrontation with the rest, as B would hang back and support Naruto with things like Biju bombs and maybe some smoke screens. But this is what Obito had actually wanted, as them turning into Tailed Beast was merely a distraction. Since the Ghetto statue had already gathered their energy, he had actually sent another team from the Akatsuki, similar to how he did for Darui's troop, to handle B, who is actually quite a distance from Naruto, and Obito believing that Sasuke and his team Taka, where they had previously failed to capture B, or at least successfully captured a clone, he would send them in once again to get rid of the Eight Tails threat. Of course, he believes that this time Sasuke would be successful, having the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan finally in place. Sasuke, who at this point is still following under Obito's orders, not only because of his hatred towards the Leaf, but now his hatred towards Naruto. Meaning that we would see Sasuke listening and actually confronting B. B at first would be caught off guard, as he would be surrounded in a massive black flame. This would initially worry Naruto, as he would think maybe Nagato and Itachi had slipped by Jiraiya and approached them, meaning Itachi and Nagato might very well be present. But he would see B somewhat, remove his own skin to escape from it, as he would transform more into a deliberate state where he would be weakened and overwhelmed by Sasuke and his group, revealing Sasuke's presence. Naruto at first would be distracted by this, as he would fall out of the Kurama state, not because of being distracted, but because of what is about to happen. Sasuke would see someone he once considered a friend falling out of the state and even seeming pretty strong. So he would decide to rush Naruto and take him out, similar to how he had B once and for all, taking and destroying those eyes so that Naruto or no other in his mind scum alike would be able to do the same. But as he approached Naruto, Naruto would fall to the ground, not even taking a single hit, but clenching his stomach to only throw up some sort of crow that in its eye bared a Mangekyo Sharingan. As this crow exited Naruto, its eye would start spinning, as it would cast a genjutsu on the eyes of Itachi, meaning the crow that had originally brought Itachi back would this time be used to put Sasuke under a genjutsu, forcing him to want the protection of the leaf. With this, he would command his Team Taka, to stand down and let the Eight Tails go, as he would use his first attempt at making a full Susanoo, asking Naruto if he's coming, surprising the young Uzumaki, who would then realize that Itachi had been dropping hints while he had been fighting his clone, talking about a crow or a secret eye hidden within Naruto who would bring Sasuke to the light, reminding him not only of the battle his clone had with Itachi, but also the time they had interacted and Naruto had fell to one of Itachi's genjutsu in the forest. So with this, Naruto finally understands that Itachi had attached to him the last hope of Sasuke returning. Naruto, in a happy state, would ask Kurama to lend him once again chakra, but even though the beast was skeptical of Sasuke's, you could say, alignment, as he had now fallen back to the side of good, he would nevertheless give Naruto the chakra, as they would reassume the state. Naruto and Sasuke now hand in hand defeating these tailed beast, or the semblance of tailed beast, leaving Obito somewhat disappointed but relieved that he had gotten this burden off his back earlier. He would go away in a swirl, as all the remaining tailed beasts would take back their Jinchuriki form, as they had been unsummoned, both the path jutsu, or the outer path, and the reanimation being released by respectively Obito and Kabuto's command. This would leave Naruto questioning Sasuke a lot, but Sasuke proclaiming that he will nevertheless, after this battle is over, kill Naruto, since at this point the only thing he has remaining is to protect the leaf. Naruto, even though being a member of the leaf, does not classify as the whole village. So even though he has a sudden urge to protect his home, Naruto is not included in the ideal one. So know that even though they are currently allies, as the Great Shinobi Alliance requires Naruto to win this war, when it is finished, Sasuke would claim both Naruto's life and the title of Hokage. Naruto would accept this, as they would give off a fist bump heading to the back lines, where Naruto would proclaim Itachi and Nagato currently were. But along with this revelation, we also discover through the dispelling of more of Naruto's shadow clones that on fronts or other fronts of the war, his shadow clones had actually proven useful, having helped defeat both the second Mizukage and the third Raikage. And as you might think, this would lead to things like his sensory ability coming in a lot of use against the second Mizukage, and his, nature neutral dark matter release being able to actually harm the Raikage. So even though it is true that in this case Temari be the most powerful wind user on the battlefield, Naruto is able to bypass the type advantage and directly damage the Raikage, meaning he wouldn't have to resort to hitting the Raikage with his own attack, and would actually be able not only bypass his defenses, but also keep him in place due to the gravitational nature of his Rasengan, so that the sealing unit could seal him away, meaning Naruto's clones had found a lot more success on battlefields across the war. But nevertheless, Gaara would still be left to deal with his own father. So moving on to the custom interaction in this what if, I guess you could say, the group of Itachi and Nagato versus the Toad Sage Jiraiya. Obviously this would be very interesting to see a non-paths interaction between Nagato and Jiraiya, but also the presence of Itachi. And nevertheless, I feel that they would overwhelm Jiraiya, but with the presence of other high-level shinobi and possibly one of the other Kage, I do think this could work. So with the present Hokage Tsunade, we could begin. The face-off would start with Jiraiya and Tsunade being pre-prepared thanks to the warning from B and Naruto, and would stand await for Nagato and Itachi. And as one might expect, there would be a pretty grandiose entrance, basically blasting through a line of shinobi with attacks like the Shinra Tensei Bansho Tenin, and even possibly a half Susanoo from Itachi. Meaning, in this case, it would somewhat be a prep for the Madara fight on their behalf, as Tsunade would be going up against Itachi, while Jiraiya would attempt to subdue his previous student, Nagato. Of course, this would lead to conversation, as Itachi would attempt to reveal plans for the war going forward to his Kage or his allegiance, which still lies with the Leaf, whilst on the other hand, Nagato would be having a pretty civil conversation with his sensei. Fighting still happening, of course. He would talk about all his sorrows and everything he had regret in his world, and would probably end with Jiraiya saying that he had been proud to the person that Nagato had turned into after their initial fight, and had wished that he had stayed in the reign a little longer to see them progress, because then him and Yahiko might have still been around to help make the world a better place. Meaning, after some back and forth between Nagato and Jiraiya, Jiraiya would most likely be able to subdue his student and even seal him, having comparable knowledge of sealing jutsu. And moving forward, we see that Tsunade had actually been keeping up with Itachi. Obviously, moves like Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi had not been put in place yet, as it had been a direct fighting confrontation. She would also note not to look in Itachi's eyes and would rather look at his feet, which would eventually lead into him using his Susanoo and even attempting to use his visual prowess, which of course would not work due to Tsunade not paying attention. And just because it is unclear if the 100 healings would help her survive in Amaterasu, we would not put her in that situation, as she would instead be able to somewhat destroy Itachi's Susanoo. But of course this would not be permanent, as he would attempt to unsheath both the Mer shield and the Totsuka blade, meaning he has superior sealing capabilities. So with this, both Jiraiya and Tsunade would now be at a disadvantage, as they would be forced to jump back and merely stall until Naruto could return to help them, as he is probably their best chance at throwing something like a Rasen Shuriken or a Biju Bomb. And with that said, as you might have guessed, Naruto and Sasuke would appear after some stalling from the Sannin. Meaning Itachi would have an interaction with his brother before he went, and possibly even giving his brother the Totsuka blade, as it is unclear if only direct dojutsu abilities or things like Susanoo accessories could be passed on. But for this what if, it would be an exception, as Sasuke would receive the Totsuka blade and even use it to seal his brother away forever, making sure no one would ever be able to bring him back. And of course there would have been dialogue between the brothers, as Sasuke would accept what had been done to him through the Genjutsu, as he would forgive Itachi and the Leaf. Through this, he would also learn of some other abilities like the Izanami and the Izanagi, two profound dojutsu abilities that would in turn cost an eye. And as Itachi would mention, they might be worth using, even though you would lose access to one of your eyes. If the need is great enough, they should take the chance. Meaning we would move on to the reveal of Madara Uchiha being summoned by the first Tsuchikage Mu. But with that out of the way, this is going to be the end to What If Naruto Had Dark Matter release Part 9. This series has gone on pretty long, and next part will be everything from Madara's awakening up until the end of Shippuden. So if you are really intrigued by this series and want to see the last part, make sure to smash like and subscribe, and maybe check out the link in the description, the top one right there, as it is a link to Saiyan Sage's channel, the person that's going to be doing the last part to this series. I really do hope y'all are going to enjoy it, and so on and so forth. But along with that, I would both like to thank the members who you see on screen, and also bring awareness to the increasing suicide rates around the world. And if you or any of your loved ones are thinking about hurting yourself or others, consider calling this number instead of doing something stupid or drastic. And with that out of the way, my lovely viewers, this has been your boy Six. Peace.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.